in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
We're going to discuss the trivium, but also Jean and I are going to have some fun with ancient ideas stemming from India. So now you have a little bit of idea what we're going to talk about. So as said, the trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, right?
Right.
Is there a reason why it is in that order?
Yes. Let's distinguish grammar, special grammar, and general grammar.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference, and what you do with grammar, you use the rules of grammar to organize a string of thoughts, and we as humans have the ability to progress through complex ideas that are related to one another. In other words, there are multiple steps of thought to come to a final idea or conclusion. And because there are multiple links to the chain, let us say, we have to have ways to put that chain together, and that's what grammar provides us. What is it, for example, that we're looking at in order to put this body of knowledge together? A body of knowledge is multiple ideas of a similar nature. Now, once we do this, we have to check ourselves. We have to make sure that that body of knowledge is of a whole, is of a piece. That's what makes it a body of knowledge. But invariably, either in the statement of that body of knowledge or as we, as the individual who are the audience, interpret it, there may be some contradictions in there.
Yeah.
So what you use logic, or I also use the ancient Greek term dialectic. I believe that this is the term that the ancient that Aristotle, for example, used, dialectic. And the idea is to have a system, and this is the system of logic, to look at the system of knowledge, which is grammar, and take the contradictions out. Now, taking contradictions out of a body of knowledge yields understanding. So if you want a definition for the term understanding, it's taking contradictions out of a chain of thought, out of a body of knowledge that yields understanding.
Yeah, I must.
And then now you see.
Go ahead.
No, we have to have a body of knowledge first before we can take the contradictions out.
Yeah.
So we don't want to start with this idea of using logic to take contradictions out. Take contradictions out of what?
Yeah, exactly. That's why the first grammar.
That's
and
why
logic.
Right.
Yeah.
And then,
sorry to interrupt you, but I must have explained something wrong in previous podcasts about grammar and taking the contradictions out. I said that if you find contradictions, which will happen when you take in all the information there is regarding a certain topic, some of these so-called facts will not fit with each other. And I said, like, well, throw the facts out. That's not good, right?
Well, if it depends on what the facts are. This is how you develop
the fact, for instance, that they say, well, the World Trade Center came down due to fire, but it came down in 11 seconds, and so that doesn't make sense to me. So I threw out the caused by fire, you see?
Well, you're taking the contradiction out. Absolutely. Okay. You did the proper thing.
Okay.
That is a contradiction.
Okay.
Now you don't start with grammar and then 1, 2 go to logic. You build your body of knowledge. You build the grammar up, and you incrementally do just what you did. Here's something that doesn't fit. Now you're using logic, the systematic. There is a system to this, which we'll discuss. But you systematically take it out, and then you come back to knowledge.
I see. Okay.
You see, it's like a spiral. You go back and forth. You start with knowledge, take the contradictions out. All right, now when you spoke of the World Trade Center, now you've got to come back and say, well, what did cause this? You see? So you're working back on grammar. You're trying to gather more facts. You're trying to put this body of knowledge together. And then you may subject it to the process of logic or dialectic, asking questions, does everything follow?
Yeah.
Another definition for logic is the art of valid inference. Now, the term inference, I-N-F-E-R. Well, inference is just the process of thought.
Oh, okay.
That's all. That's all it is. It's just the process of thought. So when you, for example, let's go back to the World Trade Center.
Mm-hmm.
You got the news. Now, the newscaster and the people behind the story are trying to imply to you. See, they are speaking, so they are implying to you, the audience, that this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your trying to understand, you can use the term inference as an inclusion of both the grammar and the logic.
Okay.
So valid inference is just another way of saying taking the contradictions out.
Okay.
Because there is such a so they imply and you infer.
I see. Yeah.
See? So I would imply to you and you would infer. So this is the way that even when we're speaking the same language, that we interpret one another. And now we get, let's say we've gotten our grammar together, we've taken all the contradictions out. Now we want to go and speak to someone,
mm-hmm.
or to test ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is our knowledge and understanding on this particular topic complete? So one of the ways you do that is either to write, which is a wonderful way to do it. Just write things out and see on the page or on the computer screen if there are any contradictions in there.
Mm-hmm.
Or go to another person and give your explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Then get their feedback, because they may have other points that are valid about this topic that you hadn't thought of.
Okay.
And it may add to that body of knowledge and logic, understanding. It may add to your logic and understanding. Or if yours is complete, you're enlightening your audience, the other person or group of people. Mm-hmm. And this is rhetoric. And there's a specific way of going about rhetoric. It's also rules-based, as are general grammar, logic, and finally a set of suggestions, really, for rhetoric. The trivium is not a prescription. It's a framework that reflects the way your mind would work. You observe things in your surroundings or within your own mind. You're making internal and external observations. Mm-hmm. Then you're taking the contradictions out of them to make that body of knowledge a whole. And then finally, you're using that knowledge and understanding in the real world. When you speak to another person or you write something down, you're back in the real world here trying to explain something.
Yeah.
Now, the best way to tie everything together, and this was given to me also by this mentor when I was, 14 or 15, but he gave me this sentence, and this will start to explain to you the difference between general and special grammar. Mm-hmm. And the sentence was a definition of existence. And here's the way it goes. Existence is every substance, action, attribute, and relationship that is, was, or ever will be.
Okay.
Now that's a pretty broad statement. Can you think of a bigger answer or a bigger question to ask than what is?
No.
So this is an answer to that question of what is. Well, another way to put this, and you'll see why general grammar is really the rules of grammar itself, whereas special grammar is the rules of grammar in a particular language or a discipline like a scientific discipline like biology or physics, which has its own set of specialized terms, its own lexicon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what unites everything. You can also restate that definition of existence using grammatical terms or parts of speech. So, existence is every noun, verb, adjective and adverb, and prepositional phrase that occur in the three dimensions of time.
Uh-huh.
Now you see, I can say existence is every substance, and you can say that word substance in your language or another language.
Yeah.
So substance is always the same thing, regardless of which language you're speaking.
Yeah.
It's a noun or a pronoun. And then action is a verb or state of being. Actually, it's either action or you're stating something is moving or something is at rest. For example, that's a state of being.
Uh-huh.
But in any language, whenever you're speaking of movement or being at rest or anything that has action, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking. It's a verb.
Mm-hmm.
You see? And then both of these, and this is in a particular order also, the noun and the verb have attributes to them.
Oh,
in other words, see, a noun can be let's say an animal, and possibly we're looking at a bear, and the bear seems to be round and big. So this is an attribute. It could be black. So all of those are attributes of the bear, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But then we could speak of something in motion. Now we see the bear starting to. He was at rest. So being at rest is a verbal description. Mm-hmm. That is his state of being. But he is now starting to run, and he is running faster, as fast as he can. So those adverbs, fast, faster, are modifying the verb. So that's an attribute of the action. Now, in any language, that, regardless of what language you're speaking, those attributes refer to adjectives and adverbs, or attributes put together.
Okay.
And finally, regardless of what language you're speaking, there are relationships. Now, there are relationships of substances, of nouns and pronouns, and relationships of actions and states of being. So a lot of these relationships are in time, temporal, or in space, for example. The bear is underneath the tree. Underneath tree is the prepositional phrase. Underneath is the part of speech that introduces tree, the object, mm-hmm. or the subject of the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
The bear is the brother of another bear in the same vicinity, for example.
Yeah.
So regardless of what language you're speaking, the prepositional phrase which shows relationships between substances, actions, and attributes are prepositional phrases. Now, there are other parts of speech that vary quite a bit. Those particular parts of speech, nouns, whenever I say noun, I also mean pronoun or a name of I can't think of the name for a proper noun. So when I say noun, I mean any of those.
Okay.
And then verb, of course, stands by itself. And then adjectives and adverbs are attributes. And then relationships of those preceding three.
Okay.
So in any language, nouns, verbs, adjectives and adverbs, and prepositional phrases all relate to the same thing, and this is why it's called general grammar. These are the parts of speech, or the first rules of putting together thoughts.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and in almost every language, a complete thought is you're speaking about something and you're saying something about what you're referring to. What you're talking about is the subject. We were talking about the bear,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're saying something. We were saying something about the bear. This is the predicate.
Uh-huh.
There's the subject, the bear, and then the predicate. Either that he's running, or that he's in a certain position, or one of his attributes.
Yeah.
So that's a complete thought, a subject and a predicate. That's the first complete thought that you carry in your mind. So what you can say general grammar refers to is the way you think, the way you initially start to order your thoughts, multiple thoughts.
Yeah.
So now we can go on to other parts of speech, in other languages that really don't, that just streamline everything, like conjunctions,
Mm-hmm.
and, or, those things that put two words together, or two clauses, two phrases. But these are words that really don't stand by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
as do the nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and prepositional phrases.
Yeah.
For example, a preposition, the word that introduces the phrase by itself, of what, above, see what.
Yeah.
These words do not stand by themselves. They need something else to go with them, and
Yeah.
these are called rather than terms of existence, which we just gave a description for. These are called terms of consciousness,
Oh.
and they lead to streamlining your thought. Conjunctions, articles, a and the, those are adjectives that tell you if the noun is particular, the man, or if it's general, a man.
Mm-hmm.
See? So these are just modifiers, and we can say that general grammar refers specifically to words or concepts of existence, which were those that I first listed. And then there are these other modifiers, and various languages have different types of modifiers, but we use that for thinking economically in a particular language.
Uh-huh.
Like, my only language is English, but I'm told that you can be much more succinct in almost any other language, because English has so many terms that have multiple meanings,
Uh-huh.
and other languages are more exacting than English. So all these terms, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections, articles. An interjection, by the way, is a word that has emotion. It's always followed by an exclamation point. So it's an exclamatory interjection,
Uh-huh.
and it's the only complete thought that only requires one word. And it was probably, if you think about it, once I explain it, it was probably the very first words that were uttered. And an exclamatory interjection is something like "wow,"
Uh-huh.
"gee." It has emotions, and it's only one word.
Yeah, yeah.
So these were probably the first words ever uttered.
Yeah.
But wow or gee what, you see?
Yeah.
Whereas you can talk about a bear, or a house, or a square, or a thought. an idea, those are all nouns. And they stand by themselves.
Yeah. So far this sounds like an explanation regarding language, right?
Yes. Well, we've got to connect language with thought.
Yeah. But I've always, and maybe I shouldn't do this because I'm also new at this trivium, but I told my listeners that grammar is like building blocks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. But what are you building? You're building thoughts.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
You
So
see,
it is language. Yeah.
A sentence, grammatically, when we're speaking about grammar, is a subject and a predicate. It's something that you're speaking about and something that you're saying about what you're speaking about. So that's a complete thought. That's the first of a complete thoughts. So you put two thoughts together and you've got two sentences. Complete thoughts together. And it's this string of sentences that make up paragraphs and finally complete essays, something that's written about one subject. And then you put these paragraphs together and you'll wind up with a monograph, for example, an essay on one topic. And then you take several monographs and put it together and come up with a book or a description of an entire series of thoughts, of an entire subject matter, of an entire topic. So these are the initial building blocks. Now, when you have these building blocks put together, as I said, when you write something out as you understand it, you can go back through after writing it, or even when you're writing. Oftentimes you can see, as you did about the Twin Towers, you can see that something doesn't fit. And now you're in dialectic, you're in logic. And what you're actually doing, dialectic refers to the conversation that you have with yourself. You can think of it as the right side of your brain asking questions of the left side, and then the left side asking questions of the right side. So this is the internal dialectic. And then finally, if you have another person or people around you that you're still trying to bring understanding to, you have an external dialogue with them. And what you're trying to do is seek the truth of the matter in a dialogue. So you can actually use this idea of taking contradictions out in a dialogue with other people.
Yeah.
But first, of course, you're working on your own understanding. So the building blocks of grammar bring you knowledge. But this is more or less, this is undifferentiated data to begin with.
Yeah.
You put data of the same quality together, and you have knowledge. Now you still don't have information. You're still in the grammar stage. You still have data of a similar nature, but it's after you take the contradictions that are either within the statement or within the way you, as the audience, reads it, or as the observer distinguishes it, then you just take all the contradictions out, and this yields understanding.
Yeah, so
and of course,
a building block can be a fact that is correct, but if you understand that fact wrong, there's also a contradiction. Is that correct?
Exactly.
I see.
Until you get the contradictions out. Now, you still have to have, for example, going back to our 9/11 example, you still have to have more data.
Yeah.
You know that fuel, that kerosene fuel that was used to fly an airplane, that was given as the excuse for the building coming down, doesn't produce enough heat to cause the building to collapse in its own footprint. So you have to go back and get more data.
Yeah.
Now I don't believe that this is the case. See, my inference, I don't believe what they imply. I infer that this is wrong. So now I've got to go back and get more evidence. And as you build evidence, then you get closer to the truth of what did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this gives you understanding. And of course, you go on to rhetoric and explain yourself to others, explain yourself to yourself.
Yeah.
And usually, when in that process, whatever it is that you're trying to know and understand comes into an even finer knowledge and understanding as you were explaining it, until finally you have a coherent body of knowledge, a body of knowledge of this chain of thoughts. So this idea of coming to logic, which is really Aristotelian logic. He didn't use that term. We can start to make our connection back to ancient India, which is, as I say, I'm 67 years old now, and as I'm getting older and older, I see more and more connections to India as being the birthplace of civilization. And the way I look at civilization is that people started to think in terms of property, of mine and yours. And the first property they looked at was the earth. They come from the earth, but now they're starting to have this idea of that the earth is for my benefit. Whereas primitive people, and I'm using the term primitive not in a detrimental sense, not pejoratively. I'm using primitive in that these people look at things in very primary ways, which is not to say simple ways. They look at their understanding as they come from the earth. They are products of the earth. And of course, it's explained in many ways, Mother Earth, that type of thing. But as soon as you get this idea of the earth being for me rather than my being from the earth, you start getting into this situation where you're going to have conflicts when you start this idea of ownership. And I'm not saying that ownership is detrimental. This is what separates us from other life on Earth. But we're still in the process of eliminating our contradictions. As I look at it, we're still in the childhood of civilization, which, as I say, is not necessarily a bad, evil, or a detrimental condition. It's just that we're working our way through it until finally we can get to this point of harmony with ourselves, with our neighbors, and with the earth, with where we come from. In other words, when we can balance coming from the earth and utilizing our environment or the earth to our mutual advantage with it, then we will have come out of our childhood into our adolescence, I suppose we could say, or into our early adulthood. But I see that as I speak to people from India, that they have a different perspective than we as Westerners do. And most of the people that I've interviewed are from the third caste. If you're familiar with their caste system, they have four major castes. Well, the people that are overseas that I've known in the United States and in New Zealand and in other travels that I've come across, they're from the third caste, which is the agricultural, the merchant, and the artisans. And they're not involved in their political situation at all. Of course, the caste right above them, the second caste, is the warrior caste. And then the caste above them is the priestly and judicial caste, the Brahmins. And these are the Brahmins are the ones that have the complete big picture of their civilization and manipulate the castes underneath them to to their ideas of,
Yeah.
of how civilization and society should work.
Yeah.
And in order to come to those conclusions that they do, I really think that they probably developed what we now refer to as the trivium. For example, most of the logic, the Aristotelian logic that we utilize in the West, was probably not given to Aristotle. He had a three-step method in logic itself. It's called a syllogism, which is a Greek word meaning connected discourse.
Cool. That's whoa. Now you're speaking Chinese to me.
Well, all you have to do is connect discourse. Discourse is just speaking or thinking. It's connected.
Okay. Now it's
See?
Chinese.
Yeah, you have knowledge. Now you have knowledge, and now you have understanding. So it's connected.
Yeah.
Now, you had written me an email, and you used a term, a priori, or a priori, which is a Latin term.
Yeah.
And it always goes with another term, which is a posteriori, or a posteriori. And what they mean is a priori just means prior.
Yeah.
And posterior means behind or before. Now, these relate to the two things that the only two things that the mind can do. It can take ideas apart and it can put ideas together.
Oh.
That's it.
We're
You
going
look out
into
at the
deductive and inductive now.
Exactly. So, and these terms, and they're kind of unfortunate terms that have come down to us from the Middle Ages, from when Latin was generally used by scholars, by the followers of Thomas Aquinas, who are called the scholastics. But when you induce, when you put things together in your mind, what you do is you observe.
Yeah.
Let's go back to our bear. There's a bear standing there, and right next to it is a fox. Well, these seem to not have exactly the same characteristics. And then you see another animal come up to join these two, and it looks like this bear over here, and a third one that looks like that. So you put it all together, and you come up with a concept, bear.
Mm-hmm.
You've taken three particular instances and then come up with this concept and a word, bear.
Okay.
So the mind is putting particular observations together in a generalization. And the generalization is this term, bear. So at some point, we get an entire subject matter. We get an entire body together that distinguishes animals, for example, and we look at their various characteristics, and at some point we've gathered so much data of all these animals that we can now take them apart into different species. So now we can talk about bears and foxes and fish and birds. And this is deducing from, in other words, we're taking apart.
Okay.
We're taking apart what we had induced at first.
Yeah,
So it's a dance.
It's
a dance, really. Zoology is the study of animals. And now we have seen that all these things that we call animals that live and have respiration and reproduce and so forth have species within them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we do with deduction. Well, this is a priori. Whenever we look at a body of knowledge, say zoology, we want to take apart and find the species in there, and maybe study that species even more, a particular species of bear. We want to look more at the species of the greater phylum of bear.
Uh-huh.
And And so we say that we have a goal in mind. So we're putting things together, our ideas and our goal, which is to study this particular species more closely, and we have a goal. So we are going through a mental process prior to coming to our full knowledge and understanding. So that's what a priori refers to. Whereas a posteriori means that those things that we are observing, the bears and the birds and whatnot, have already existed. They existed before we started to observe them.
Uh-huh.
So this
Okay.
a posteriori just means that you're observing things that already exist in the real world, in the objective world. And a priori means that you are putting together, you are taking apart into a species that which is generally known. You start with a generalization a posteriori, everything that came before, that exists before your thought process started, and now you're over here in a priori. You have a goal in mind that you want to have knowledge and understanding of those observations, of those generalizations. So this works very much like grammar and logic or dialectic, that you put together something in grammar, the first building blocks, and then with logic you take them apart to see if there are any contradictions. Because that's the only way you'll find a contradiction, is to take it apart.
These are rules of definition, is that correct?
Mm-hmm, correct.
There's genera and differentia.
Exactly. And this is another part of logic. This is not the syllogism, which only works with taking things apart.
Okay.
With deduction. It doesn't work with induction, because induction is an observation. And there are many things that you can only point to. Like, try to describe the color yellow to me. See? Yet I can go and point to an object and point to it, and you'll say that is a yellow object.
Yep.
See, there are certain things that we just can't put into words, but we can point to it because it exists, and we just don't have enough knowledge. Well, there is enough knowledge now that we can quantify colors, for example, because we know that they consist of wavelengths, and we can use instrumentation that we've gotten a lot of experience with, and we can tell the different wavelength of yellow from blue, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But with our unaided mentality and our five senses, then our five senses are the only thing that keep us in contact with reality. We see, we hear, we taste, we smell, and we touch.
Yeah.
And that's how we make our inductive observations.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry too much about the rules of induction, although we're still trying to determine what that process is. But going back to Aristotle, he had already published what he called his book on rhetoric. Now, he had been the tutor, the private tutor of Alexander of Macedon, who later became known as Alexander the Great.
Oh.
But he was tutoring Alexander in his adolescence, and he gave him what he knew about grammar and rhetoric. And then Alexander, of course, grew to become a conqueror. And as he went from Greece throughout the ancient world, he finally got to Persia and India, and India was just such a complexity to him that he turned around and came back. And I believe it was on his way back, Aristotle's nephew, it was his Aristotle's great nephew on his sister's side, was sending back specimens, plant and animal specimens to Aristotle.
Uh-huh.
And it's been known that Alexander's expedition was sending these items back to Aristotle, but his nephew, and I got this from speaking to several people of Indian descent,
Mm-hmm.
that they had this idea of logic, of taking contradictions out, and rather than a 3-step process that we now know as Aristotelian syllogism, a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion, they had a 5-step process.
Oh.
And one of the steps was pretty much what we consider a priori, or deductive, is the first thing that they would state in their 5-step syllogism was their goal.
Huh.
What was it that they were trying to prove?
Uh-huh.
And Aristotle evidently got this 5-step system sent to him by his nephew.
Uh-huh.
And he pared it down. He streamlined it to these 3 terms because it was easier to utilize. But you can go to the internet and do a word search on 5-step or just Indian logic, and it will be explained to you, and you can contrast the Indian syllogism with the Aristotelian syllogism. So here was Aristotle, who had published his book on rhetoric, and he had already taught this to Alexander. And when Alexander got word that Aristotle had published his treatise back in Athens, he wrote him a letter and said that he wished no harm to Aristotle, but he said Aristotle has acted improperly.
Oh.
Because he says, now what do I have when I'm relating to my enemies? He has no way of using rhetoric to overcome what he sees as his opposition to that he's fighting. And it's said that it was shortly thereafter that he had Aristotle's nephew executed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, as long as we are on this topic, I have one question that a listener sent me. You mind if I ask this?
Oh, please do.
Oh, no, this is not so nice of me. I had the question in my email and I unfortunately closed it. Let me open this for a sec. And I'm really looking forward, because we're already 1 hour gone here, to a little bit of discussion about Indian philosophy. Because I have a lot of trouble with them, to be honest with you.
Well, I do too. And it's not with the people that are in the Vaishya caste. These are the believers. It's just like I don't have trouble with people that belong to any of the bureaucratic churches.
Yeah.
You know, the Western churches. Usually the believers have a sense of ethics, a moral code that they feel that they're getting from their religion. But it's the people that lead these religions.
Yeah, indeed.
I don't care which one it is. And I think that all of these bureaucratic religions have gotten their impetus from India. That everything, the Indians actually call Hinduism the mother of all religions, of all organized religions.
Yeah, I can understand because I've read a lot of Veda, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And although I cannot trust the translations, I find a lot of ideas in there that can be found back, like the Trinity, for instance, in Christianity. But here I have the question. It says, the Trivium method, and please correct these questions if they are wrong, okay? The Trivium method implies that there is one objective reality and that it can be known through the senses and understood through cognition. Now here comes one of philosophers I haven't read much. It's about Kant. He says, up to now it has been assumed that all our cognition must conform to the objects, but all attempts to find out something about them a priori through concepts that would extend our cognitions have, on this presupposition, come to nothing. Now that I have to read that like 3 times to understand it, first of all. And then it continues, hence let us once try whether we do not get further with the problem of metaphysics by assuming that the objects must conform to our cognition. Now that doesn't make sense to me at all, because objects to me, as a noob philosopher, are part of reality. And we don't decide what reality is. Reality does.
Exactly. Reality has no contradictions. Now, I've heard a lot of discussion about this since I stated it on Jan Irvin's show about 5 years ago. That is to state that reality has no contradictions is a matter of faith.
Oh?
Yeah, but that is the definition of reality. That it does not contradict itself. It is in harmony with itself. It's our interpretation of reality. Now, getting back to Kant, he had a very, like many of these modern philosophers, I take all Western philosophy, because of my background, back to Plato and Aristotle. And really, the person that put together this idea that the senses mean a lot was Pythagoras. And Pythagoras spent 20 years in Egypt going through the mystery schools there, and then he made his way across to Persia. And lo and behold, where was his last stop? India. Pythagoras came back from India to start up his philosophical and religious school that utilized number, essentially, that the world can be quantified as well as qualified, and he came up with what we now know as the Pythagorean theorem. Of the 3, 4, 5 triangle, the scaling, which means it's doesn't have any two sides alike, but the squares of the right angle, it's a right angle triangle, the squares of the right angle add up to the square of the hypotenuse. And this is the Pythagorean theorem. Well, that also came from India. It just came down to us as the Pythagorean theorem. And what Pythagoras was saying, and this is where you get the idea of the trivium and the quadrivium, the 3, 4, 5. The 3 is the trivium, the number 4 side is a quadrivium, and the 5 is the 5 senses with which we see objective reality. There were a number of philosophers in his time, and maybe we should give the definition of philosophy, which is looking at the thing itself. Now, this is what Kant is famous for having said, is that you cannot perceive the thing itself, because he did not believe in essentially the accuracy of the 5 senses. Well, again, it's not the 5 senses; it's our interpretation of the input from one of those 5 senses. It's our misinterpretation. But he comes from a long line, from a very long line of tradition, which we in the West call the sophists, the school of sophistry in ancient Greece, who stated that knowledge to humans is impossible. They were true skeptics. They believed in nothing. So the question is, if they state that, as does Kant, that knowledge is impossible, then we should take them. How do they know that? If knowledge is impossible to us, how do they know
that's
that?
That's a contradiction in itself.
There you go. So as soon as you see a contradiction, and Kant has, I think, many imaginative and useful things to say. I haven't studied him that much because he's so difficult to read, but he's very consistent. And I think he was promoted by the church, essentially, to overcome a problem that the church was having first with Giordano Bruno, who looked at the heliocentric idea of the universe, that the universe didn't revolve around the Earth but around the sun, as Copernicus had suggested. And then Galileo comes along and demonstrates things like that heavy objects fall at the same rate as light objects.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, now the problem that the church had with this is now you could go and test for yourself. You know, you didn't have to listen to what the church fathers were saying was reality. You could go look for yourself, and this was dangerous to their way of thinking at the time.
Yeah.
And so you had to say that Bruno was dabbling in black magic, and he was burned at the stake.
Yeah.
And of course Galileo was under house arrest after the trial that found him guilty of whatever it was they found him guilty of. I understand that in 1998 the church finally officially recognized that he was right.
Yeah.
What he was proposing. So you can see that we're held to these illusions of what is reality, and what Kant was saying, and it actually came up from René Descartes. What Kant was saying was that you need an authority to tell you what reality is, because you cannot trust your senses.
Yeah, that would help the church very much.
Right. And because his philosophy was so consistent, he had a system that was consistent. Now, the system didn't have all that much to do with reality, but it was very consistent within itself, much as a lot of mathematics. There are a lot of disciplines in mathematics utilizing cardinal numbers rather than ordinal numbers.
Yeah, but that's not fair, is it? I mean, if somebody says that there is no free will, for instance, I've heard this on a podcast also, and then first you start by defining what free will is, and you can build a very good, consistent story around that. But wait a minute.
That is why you need the idea of definition in the discipline of logic to see this. It is up to you not to be deceived, because there are plenty of people around who, not necessarily knowingly, are trying to pull off a deception. And a lot of people that I've been exposed to kind of demonize Kant. And I don't know that it was Kant himself, or I know that you have some things that are not all that pleasant to say about Auguste Comte.
Yeah, for instance.
And you know that those names sound similar, but they're spelled differently. Kant is K-A-N-T.
Yes.
And Comte is C-O-M-T-E.
Yeah.
Auguste Comte. And Auguste Comte just came up with this other deception over here called positivism.
Yeah.
And it's just another way of saying that the authority, whatever the authority says, is the truth.
Yeah.
And that's positivism. And you can see it in legal terms.
Yes.
That there is natural law and there is positive law.
Yeah. And
positive law supposedly is man's law. Just because somebody posited, that's where positive comes from, that somebody said it, posited this idea, and it's been tested in court, if you use English law, that uses precedent, that there have been enough people that have voted on this, that therefore it's true.
Yeah.
And it's come so far away from natural law. Natural law is discovered. We go to nature to try to understand what the laws of harmony are. And if man comes up with the idea of making a rule to govern the behavior of other men, so long as it's in harmony with natural law, put into the language of man, it's usually just. It's usually keeping other men from harming their fellows or their fellows' property in civilization. But when it starts getting so far away from natural law that it's just the rules that are made up by someone as they go along, because we've, over time or enough people say that this is so, this is the precedent, then it's called law, and now you have the authority of law.
Yeah.
So you're always being inundated with this concept of authority over you, that you cannot trust your own thought, you cannot trust your own senses, you cannot trust your own observation of nature to discover its laws, or to see where this positive law, which is always undergoing revision, differs from natural law. So it's up to you to have this idea of defining. And to me, the rules of definition, let's just go back to logic or dialectic.
Sure.
Because it essentially has three parts. One is the idea of inductive and deductive reasoning, which, as I say, you always try to simplify things down to their basics. And induction is generalizing or putting ideas together. Deduction is taking those general ideas apart. So it's the two things that the mind does. It takes ideas apart and it puts ideas together. And you can even go to the two hemispheres of the brain and determine where most of this occurs. Deduction happens in the left hemisphere of the brain. Induction or generalization, seeing the big picture, is on the right side.
Oh.
So we've differentiated the two types of reasoning, and then we go to the syllogism, which is how to take how to systematically go about deep general observations, and that is the syllogism. And then finally you go to how do you determine what is, or how do you define, how do you identify things?
Yeah, that's an important one, especially for a philosopher.
Well, there's a philosopher that I have followed, a modern philosopher who more or less put her philosophy together between, I think, Aristotle. She admits to that, but she got a lot of ideas from the Stoics, and we know her as Ayn Rand. And she started a philosophical school called Objectivism. And she has one of the better definitions of logic that I've heard. It's the art of non-contradictory identification.
Yeah.
So identification goes to this idea of definition, which is using the big picture, the general picture, and then finding something about a particular within that general category and describing its differences. So the general category is the genera, and the one that belongs within the class, but because of these differences, these differentia, make it a species. So we have a general category of bear, for example, the genera of bear, but there are some bears that are white and they live in northern climes, and there are others that are black and they live in different latitudes, and there are some that are smaller, and there are some that are in the southern hemisphere that are smaller yet. So these are the species of the genera, and we differentiate those species by using this process of looking at the big picture, then finding the particulars within that genera, and stating what the differences within the general category is, And this gives us a definition. It identifies what it is. It identifies a black bear from a polar bear.
Yeah.
So it's, again, this dance that I'm speaking of, that you look at the big picture and the small picture. You look at universals and particulars. And really this goes throughout this method, and it's really the way that your mind naturally works. It's looking at general surroundings and then distinguishing what is within that general surrounding and seeing how that harmonizes with what is.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times, because our mind is such that it's not perfect. We are capable of making mistakes, and this system, this trivium system, is, as we go through life, is trying to alleviate those mistakes as you go forward in time, because the more you utilize it, the more effective it becomes. So the earlier you start in life, the easier this process comes to you. As I say, it is a natural process.
Yeah.
And the way to look at this is as a computer, that there is input, there is processing, and then there's output, and they're all interrelated. In a computer, the input would be the scanner or the keyboard. You're putting the grammar into the memory of the computer. And then it's the computer logic which finds those things that are similar, processes it. So your central and peripheral processors will do this idea of having a general look at it and then pulling out the specifics or finding the differences in there.
Yeah.
And you get the output, which is on the screen or the printer.
Yeah.
Now, what we are given through our various institutions, institutions of influence, is we're given input, and we're supposed to memorize that and simply parrot it. So all we're really going through life doing is taking in input and then having output. We take in the story about 9/11 and we accept it without being critical about it, without thinking it through, and then we start to espouse, we as individuals and groups of individuals, saying, aha, this is what happened. These planes hit those buildings, they collapsed because of the fuel that was being burned in the building, and we go on about whatever we go on about.
Yeah.
So if we take back this process in the middle here of non-contradictory identification, this really is the core of the trivium, which is this idea of dialectic, of having this conversation, looking at the big picture, finding differences with members within it, and seeing the specialized applications. And this gives us understanding. When the specialized application falls into the general category, because of its differences, we can make general statements about it, and then back to the specialty. And this is the progress that man has made through time, especially since the beginning of civilization, where we have the impetus, we have reasons for doing these things now, because we must come at some point into harmony with ourselves as individuals, with our neighbors, friends, and associates, and finally with our surroundings. And it's through the observation where everything starts, observing as these actions and relationships go forward. And this is the framework that we can use. Now, the thing that has made the trivium, I think, come to the forefront in the last few years is mostly due to the work of Jan Irvin, who saw what the first three portions of logic do, which is to produce this list of logical fallacies, informal logical fallacies. And here we go. It's like trying to use the terms a priori and a posteriori, just because they came down to us from several hundred years ago. But informal logical fallacies mean that these fallacies occur in either form of reasoning, of either deductive or inductive.
Okay.
Another term that you can use for these are analysis and synthesis. When you analyze something, you're taking it apart to get to an understanding.
Yeah.
When you synthesize something, you are taking the particular parts together to come up with the product. So synthesis is induction. Analysis is deduction.
Yeah.
And these produce these things called, they were used so much, these contradictory statements, that various schools, philosophical schools, in the ancient world, both Eastern and Western, came up with this list of fallacies that occur in either form, in either inductive or deductive, and that's what informal logical fallacies refer to. And it's an unfortunate way of, the way we think today, that's an unfortunate term, informal. And that's all it means, because there are such things as formal fallacies.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can get to formal fallacy, and this is why you really have to get a book or take a course on Aristotelian logic, because in there you have to take various types of declarative sentences. There are three basic types, and we needn't get into that right now. But they always have a subject and a predicate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this idea called the square of opposition, and there are 4 different ways that you can put these 3 types of sentences together. Actually, you're trying to, and I'm getting a little bit too technical here. This is why you have to take the course,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll come together when you do it. Or you can just look up the square of opposition, Aristotle's square of opposition, and you can see that there are different ways within this form. Formal fallacies relate to deductive thinking, and there are several ways that you can go wrong. And again, it refers that it's very technical to get into, but I'm trying to think of the most commonly the most commonly used formal fallacy, but it really doesn't matter. Once you start taking the course, you can work this out for yourself.
Yeah, Aristotelian, that word, that logic I was going to go into further, just as also because I'm interested in it, but also because I need to be able, in my opinion anyway, to explain this on air also, because it belongs to logic, right?
Mm-hmm. It's difficult to explain this on air.
Okay. Well, I'm not scared of that.
What I would suggest, and I asked that I could do this before we started recording, but there is a course that I took that was recorded, very much like a university course. I took a course in philosophy when I was in university, and part of that course was this course on logic.
Okay.
And then several years, it wasn't that many years later. It was only about 3 or 4 years after I was in university, I came across this again. I mentioned Ayn Rand's objectivism,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a student named Dr. Leonard Peikoff, who followed her philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
but as part of her project, he got a doctorate in philosophy, so he got a Western view, university view of philosophy, and he put out this several courses in front of an audience, and one of them is this Introduction to Logic course.
Okay.
And I think he did it over a 10-week period of time, but it's now available for, I think, under $10 from the Ayn Rand eStore site. It's an MP3 download, and it has several exercises in there on the informal logical fallacies. And to me, it's the best course because it mirrored the university course that I had taken.
Okay.
So closely. Now he will put in some comments, a number of comments about objectivist philosophy itself. But he states at the very beginning that he's going to attempt to give the unbiased course as he sees it.
Okay.
And since I got this course back in the early 70s, 74 or 75, I think he recorded this in 72 or 73, and I paid, I don't know, $350.
Oops.
For the cassette tapes back then.
That's a lot.
And, well, it was one of the more fruitful purchases I've ever made.
I should get my hands on that.
Well, as I say, I think I've given you the information.
Yes.
But you go to Ayn Rand's e-store and get Dr. Leonard Peikoff's. Actually, if you go down to the homepage, it comes up, and go to the lower left-hand side, and you'll see the bestsellers. And Introduction to Logic is listed number 1, and I just checked it today. Number 2 is another course by Peikoff. It's on grammar. But this course is really more grammar for writers. He doesn't get into general grammar that much.
Okay.
But a lot of people, just because it's got grammar as part of the title, have bought it, and it's well worth taking.
Okay.
But the one that I think you in particular would be very interested in is the third one on the list, which is called Founders of Western Philosophy.
Yeah.
And he's got 2 of them. He has the ancient philosophers and the modern philosophers.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I hope they send stuff to the Netherlands so I can get my hands on that.
Oh, sure. Well, you can download it off the internet.
Oh, like that. It's not a cassette anymore, of course. No.
I went through so many cassettes, and then I purchased them on DVD, and they were between $300 and $400 each. And each one of those, actually all of those bestsellers down there, that are listed down there, they're all Peikoffs. There are a number of different authors on this site, including Ayn Rand. But I can't really say that I was a student of Ayn Rand. I really was a student of Dr. Leonard Peikoff.
Okay.
And as I say, there is much in there that is worthwhile, and there is much in there that I disagree with.
Yeah.
And I haven't ever found any one school of thought that I am completely taken with, which leads me to bring up another website, and I'm so happy to see this occurring worldwide right now in the so-called alternative media. But just the other side of you, up there in Sweden, is the Red Ice Creations, Red Ice Radio.
Yes.
And I would suggest they have, particularly lately, they have a number of extremely informative interviews. And one of them that I was particularly interested in is a scholar from there in the Netherlands, Geert Andriga is his name. But you can go to their website, look through their inventory there.
You mean Red Ice?
Red Ice, yes. Correct.
Yeah, not red ice, that what you see
red
it,
ice,
but ice that is frozen water.
Yes, that's what it's called. It's called Red Ice Creations. Go to Red Ice Radio. And there are 2 different programs. One is hosted by a person named Henrik Palmgren.
Yeah.
And the other one is called Radio 314, and that is hosted by Lana Lochtef, I believe is the way you pronounce her name. But I would suggest going through, particularly, as I say, their last several episodes. Okay. And one of them is on bureaucracy by this Dutch scholar who teaches there at one of the universities, which I found fascinating.
Yeah.
But there are just a number of things there. But one of the things that I went through the other day was when you get to their site, up top there are a number of tabs, and I just read the tab called About Red Ice Creations.
Mm-hmm.
And there is stated, as you go through the entire statement, and I've heard you in your presentations echoing much of what they're trying to get their audience to come across is to question things.
Yeah.
And don't, for example, at the very end, he says, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, exactly.
In other words, even the Brahmins who have brought so much superstition to us through India and through religion, even they had much constructive to say.
Yeah.
In fact, I've come to believe that anything that man makes, that anything that has come from the mind of man, because it's not in complete harmony with nature, because we are fallible beings, there is a constructive use, there is an absent-minded misuse. In other words, people being useful fools
mm-hmm.
by misinterpretation, and then there is abuse
mm-hmm.
of this thing. And one of the places you can see that is, getting back to the trivia, in rhetoric. Rhetoric is a terribly two-edged sword, because it can be used constructively or destructively.
Yeah.
Convincing people, like you had mentioned, one of the dangerous tenets of having this idea of immortality, that we have an immortal soul that has come out of India.
Yeah.
And here I've got to say that there are different sensibilities in the United States than there are in Europe or other parts of the world. And you had mentioned something to me in your one of our first email exchanges, and you said it was dangerous.
Yes.
What has come up, you weren't specific, but you said what has come up in Indian philosophy, telling people that they have an immortal soul, and therefore, if I, the authority, tell you to go kill one of your kinsmen under my authority, not to worry about it, because
mm-hmm.
that person has an earthly body, and that's all that you're destroying.
Mm-hmm.
And his soul will go on. And in fact, you may even be doing him a favor.
Yeah.
Because he may come back with this idea of reincarnation. He may come back in a higher caste, or in a different
or a higher planet.
Or a higher planet, whatever.
Yeah.
But I had never heard that in the United States. I've understood that this idea of selling you on immortality to do less than constructive things is dangerous. But I had never heard that until I went to New Zealand, and I was speaking to someone from Australia. So that is a sensibility that has not come about in the United States. That this idea of immortality, and you're doing somebody a favor by killing them in war or whatever, is a terrible deception.
Yeah.
Terrible deception.
Do you mind if I quote you a part of a verse from the Bhagavad Gita? Because you talk about what reality is, right?
Yes.
And they say they have we have in our system the elements, right? Like oxygen and things like that. They see it rather different. And all of the times when I see people talking about the elements, they always mention earth, water, fire, air, and then sometimes they say spirit as a fifth one.
Mm-hmm.
But these, they seem to come from India indeed, because there is a verse there in the Bhagavad Gita, and it goes earth, water, air, fire, and then ether as a fifth one. But then they add 3, and it's mind, intelligence, and ego. And they call them elements. Have you ever heard of that?
Well, I've heard. It's only because I've connected, for example, with Plato and Freud.
Yeah.
And Carl Jung. And I don't know how many other people have come up with this. And I also connected to the Yggdrasil tree, for example.
Uh-huh.
Or to the what's the Greek oracle at Delphi.
Yeah.
All of these have 3 elements, what you're just speaking of.
Uh-huh.
And let's see if you can connect what you just described there. I'll use Plato's terms.
Okay.
And he said that we have a base element to our psyche. Now they're the ones that came up with these terms, psyche. They were goddesses or sub-goddesses or something. Or Psyche herself was the one who came up with mind. And so the base element is a beast, and this is where your appetites are. So this is your appetitive self, and your appetites can get you into a lot of trouble, but these are the things that can lead to your survival. Like you have an appetite for food, you have an appetite for shelter, you have an appetite for safety, you have an appetite for sex. And unchecked, these appetites can lead you astray because you're not conforming to either your surroundings or your the people that surround you. But you can alleviate these with the second part of your psyche, which is the will. And he likened it, rather than to the beast, he saw the lion as being more noble than this uncontrollable beast. The lion at least has some degree of control and nobility, and of course a will. That the lion will not necessarily kill for no reason, but for hunger or for domination. But it always has the rudiments of a purpose. So this is the second part. And then finally, there is the higher mind, or the mind of the philosopher. And this is the one that you can actually control. And this is where the higher people, the natural masters, he saw things as people being either naturally masters and natural slaves.
Yeah, leaders and followers.
Right. And that the masters are in contact with their higher self, with this philosophic, with the logos, with the logical self. And this is the one that you can cultivate. And of course, how do you cultivate it? You cultivate it essentially through the trivium.
Yeah.
You see. Now, Freud took exactly the same thing, and he had the Ich, the Mensch, and the Übermensch. And in Latin, that was translated to be the id, the it. You see, the man, the Mensch, and the Overman, or the Superman. Yeah. And these correlate exactly. Although he uses the term man, where Plato used the term lion, the willful self, the ego. So there is the id, and in fact, Plato actually called the slavish part of the population, as he saw them, he called them the its.
Yeah.
They're all its.
Yeah, that's why I don't like him.
Well, right. And here we go up to up to Freud, and he has the id, or the it, the man, and the Superman. Then a person, of course, who was influenced by Freud is Carl Jung, and he has the shadow. The shadow correlates to the beast and to the id.
Okay.
And there's not much you can do about the shadow except accept it. It is part of your psyche.
Uh-huh.
And then the next one up is the child. And this connects to Freud's ego and to Plato's lion. And the child, you see, has some degree of control, but it's immature.
Uh-huh.
It's not fully volitional. He can't make good. And then finally, the third part, which Jung calls the wise old man and the old mother. And these are the people that make choices, make good choices. Mm-hmm. The wise old man and the good mother. And those relate to the super ego, or the Übermensch, and the philosopher.
Huh.
Now you can also see this in the Yggdrasil tree. The roots go down, and there's supposedly a serpent around the roots of the tree. And this is Helheim. And then you get to the area where we live as people on Earth, and this is Midgard. Okay. And this is where we are. And then finally you get up to the branches, the leafy branches of the top of the tree, and this is Asgard.
Yeah.
This is heaven, and this is where those who die valiantly in battle are part of Asgard in the special place called Valhalla.
Yeah.
Now, the Yggdrasil tree is used in the bigger sense, in the general sense, as explaining the universe, the Earth, that there is this place beneath, which is hell, where we get the English term hell from Helheim, and then Midgard, which is right in the middle, and this is Earth, and finally Asgard is the heavens.
Uh-huh.
But it also describes what Plato was describing about the psyche. And in modern brain science, and you've all heard this, is that we have three parts of the brain that are built on top of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And the base part of the brain we often call the reptilian complex.
Yeah.
And reptiles have only instinct, only base appetites. They have no will of their own. In fact, when they're cold-blooded, when the temperature goes down to a certain level, they become completely inactive. They go into a hibernation state. So they have almost no control. But then you go up to the second part of the brain, and oftentimes we call it the mammal complex, which is built on top of the reptile complex. Well, the mammal complex is where we have this idea of will, where we start to have emotions. And there's a reason for emotions if you just look at the children of mammals. They have an extended childhood after birth, and usually it's the mother that has an attachment and needs a motivation to take care of that child.
Yeah.
So this is where emotions come in. That mammals were probably the first creatures to have emotions for these various reasons. This is the lion. The lion is a mammal, and it's got the rudiments of will, just like a child has the rudiments of will, can make choices, but often immature choices.
You've made a lot of connections to those last three, mind, intelligence, and ego.
Yeah, and finally, we have the neocortex, the new part of the brain, which is the philosophic part, which is the one that we can cultivate. This is where we can actually take control through study, and through implementation. And this, of course, is the upper part of the brain, which, as I understand it, almost all mammals have. One of the interesting things is, of the five senses, reptiles have four, and in the mammalian complex of the brain, which is built on top of the reptile, we have the sense of smell. So reptiles can only taste. That's why you often see them flicking their tongues out. They can taste, but they can't smell. And so those are our five senses within the reptilian and mammalian complexes. Yeah. And then we have the part where free will exists. If we make the conscious effort to utilize the neocortex, to become philosophers, to look at things in themselves rather than looking to authority.
Yeah. Now these the last verse that I quoted, that is supposed to be they call them elements, but there's something missing from there, because in all of those elements I don't see any consciousness appearing. And then they come up with this idea of jiva, where we get the word rejuvenate from, for instance. And maybe anima, but I'm not sure about that. They also call it atma, and that those are Sanskrit terms. And they try and tell us that we are a soul, or we have a soul. I'm still confused as to what exactly I am, because it's a real problem. I've only come to the conclusion that I'm not my body and I'm not my mind, but that's about as far as it goes for the moment. But
consider this. Rather than saying you are not one or the other, in other words, either or. Yeah. How about also and?
Yeah, that's what people keep telling me. Yeah. But I really have a hard problem with accepting that I am this body, because I see my body changing from childhood to older age, but I'm still the same person. You see, I'm still what's in there. What makes my body move, what makes my body alive, is still the same. So I rather look at that and try and find out what that is than focus on my body, you see?
Well, I was listening to some of your presentations, which you emailed to me when you first invited me. Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned is, what is it to be alive? What is the life force? Yeah. And all I can say is, we don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
We don't know, right?
No, but that's why we're trying to progress.
Could it be
slowly,
that it's just not conceivable?
Well, obviously, because we haven't conceived of it yet.
Yeah,
You see, I don't look at
that's a cruel joke, though, to make on us, isn't it?
No, not at all. It's possibly one of the. There's this idea that there is a reason for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the idea that there is no reason, that it's all determined.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't make sense to me, because everything that I look at in nature has a reason.
Well, it's in harmony. It's in harmony. Yeah, you can determine a reason for it. You can interpret that it has a reason.
Yeah, like for instance the sun and its planets. It's obvious that the sun is there to enlighten and warm the planets. It's not so hard, is it?
But when you look at the overall picture, what is it? I mean, what is it doing there? One of the basic mysteries to me is what animates life. Because here we are, this group of chemicals, essentially, that have a finite existence, that have a beginning, a birth, have a life, we maintain for a while. Yeah. And then at one point, whatever animates us goes away, even though our body still remains, its chemicals remain and will deteriorate because this animation force is no longer with us.
Yeah.
Now, what is that animation force? I don't know.
No, I don't know either. This idea is presented also in the Trinity, in the Indian Trinity, where you have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And Brahma is the creator, and Vishnu keeps it all going, and Shiva is the destructor. You could also put time to that, like past, present, and future. And they tell us a lot about that. And then the people in India, for instance, they go worshipping these gods. And I'm like, well, that's not what's the meaning of this, is it?
Well, you can look at that Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva as being birth, life, death.
Yes.
Rebirth, life, death. Now, if you look at the English term God, G-O-D, you can look at the G as being generation, the O as being operation, and the D as being dissolution. It's the same Trinity.
Yeah, yeah.
Generation, operation, which is life, dissolution, which is death, and then regeneration, operation. The same. That's why I'm saying that I see all these concepts going back to these ancient times.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at some of the lore from India, the idea that there is this thing called Brahman, from which the term Brahma, creator god, comes from. And then, of course, the priests themselves are called Brahmin to connect them with the idea of the creator. And this, you cannot really speak of Brahman. It is not a thing or a person.
Correct.
It is emanation. It is transcendence and emanation. And you can look at some of the lore, which is very sophisticated about this. And it's expressed through time, which is what you just mentioned, that it can be past, present, and future. And one of the ideas you can go to, and again, for those that are interested, you can look this up. Just do a word search or go to Wikipedia and look up the term. I can't think of it right now. It's got to do with time. But one of the things that you can look at and bring it up is century of Brahma, or Brahma 100 years. And this is where you can also get some of the idea behind Christianity about the Abrahamic God creating the world in 6 days and then resting on the seventh. But their idea is that there is this thing called Brahman, which you really can't speak of.
Correct.
But it emanates, and the first thing it emanates is the first creature, and it is called Brahma.
Yeah.
And because it emanates from Brahman, it is called Brahma. And the reason it becomes the a lot of times you can't even use the term God, the avatar of creation, is the first thing it does is it creates its opposite. So what is the opposite of creation?
Destruction.
Death or destruction. Yeah. Okay. Now the question becomes, creation and destruction of what? So you have to have this idea of something that goes on for a period of time. And so together they create Vishnu, so that you can have a beginning and an ending to life, or to maintenance, or to operation.
Yeah, that's the order in which they tell me it happened also. Brahma was born on this emanation, which we can't describe because it just can't be described in material words, because it's not, as they say, it's not material. But then Brahma comes into existence, and he has to be material, because we're talking about existence here. And then
it's the first creature.
And he's on top of this lotus, and he's trying to find out what's going on here, and he goes down the lotus, meets this enormous sea, which quantum mechanics also speaks about sometimes. And then he gets scared and he climbs up the lotus again and he starts looking within. And he's instructed there on how to create the rest of the universe, because it's supposedly it's all empty. There's nothing there, not even a star. So, and then
there is no matter.
Mm-hmm.
Let me continue with the
Sure.
and we'll see what where we got the idea of quantum physics and a lot of other myths. So these three come about, and they're awake for this is the term I was trying to remember, kalpa. Just look up Kalpa.
Yes.
And kalpa is a period of time, and here's where you get into the difference between the Brahman time and human time, because they mention human time. Well, a kalpa is a day of Brahma, and it correlates to approximately 4.3 billion human years.
Yeah.
What we consider today and several thousand years back in India as a human year.
Yeah.
So at the end of that kalpa, there is a time for Brahma to go to sleep.
Yeah.
For the next kalpa, which is the Brahma night, and it's exactly the same period as a Brahma day.
Yeah.
Well, so Brahma goes to sleep first, and then Vishnu, and what happens is Shiva is the last one to fall into sleep, and he destroys all life within the universe.
Yeah.
So all there is inanimate matter.
Mm-hmm.
There is no life for that particular kalpa. There are stars, inanimate material in the universe. And then Brahma is the first one to awaken after that first 4.3 billion years, and he creates life back in the universe. And he has to awaken Vishnu to maintain that life. Okay. And so they go through another day of Brahma.
Yeah.
And you go forward until a year of Brahma comes up, and I forget how many human years that is, but it is this alternation of animated life and inanimate matter. A Brahma day, we have life in the universe. A Brahma night, only inanimate matter. From that inanimate matter, we create for the next kalpa life in the universe. And the first period of time that comes to mind, again, you can look this up, Wikipedia or the internet. The next one that comes to mind is 50 years of Brahma. You can extrapolate as to how many days correlated to human years there are. But the final thing, the final number that you come to is Brahma was emanated from Brahman to exist for 100 Brahma years. And if you extrapolate from the kalpa, you come out with 311 trillion 40 billion years. That is 1 century of Brahma. And that is how long the material universe is in existence, going between life and non-life. At the end of that 311 trillion 40 billion human years, everything is folded back into Brahman. There is no material universe. There is only energy from which the material came from. There's only radiation in space. And this is what they call ether. And this lasts for 100 Brahma years, where there's absolutely nothing but energy in the ether in the universe. And then the cycle starts all over again. But Atman is the personal being. Atman is what each individual human is supposed to have, and it's made up of jiva.
Yeah.
There is jiva and ajiva. Jiva is the animate, as I understand it. I may be mistaken.
Yeah.
But ajiva is the inanimate.
Yeah,
so
that would be correct.
During the kalpa, there is jiva. During the daytime kalpa. During the nighttime kalpa, there is only ajiva.
Yeah.
But Atman is part of the atomic structure of humans, the distinct particles or waves that make up the human. And during a daytime Brahma Kalpa, we have an Atman, which is identical to Brahman. And when you see this whole thing as a cycle, because it's said that Atman is the same as Brahman.
Yeah.
And you can see that at the end of that 100 Brahma years, we all fold back into Brahman. And that's what's meant by it.
Yeah.
Now, you are beginning to become enlightened when you as an individual can see 311 trillion 40 billion years as only the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And then the process starts over. And from there are different theories that go out, is that you live the same life again, only with some certain differences, and other interpretations say that it's a completely different. There is jiva and ajiva again, but that the events are different, over that particular period of time.
Yeah.
But the connection to the blink of an eye is what was known for keeping time in the Indus Valley, I believe it was. You're at a fairly high altitude and it's dry, and most humans would blink about every 4 seconds. So this is the connection between the smaller time frame, which is the blink of an eye, and there are several terms for it, three different terms that I know of, just can't think of it. But this is the blink of an eye as compared to the 311 trillion 400 billion or 40 billion years.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's the general and the specific, the blink of an eye and the Brahma, the century of Brahma.
Okay. Oh.
And because this mirrors the way we think, you can actually start to piece this back together with this idea of our computer mind, input, processing, and output.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Mr. Gene, we've almost completed 2 hours, and time flew by, I must say.
And we never even got to rhetoric, really.
No, that's too bad, but I'm afraid we're going to have to call it for today, because that's all the airtime I have.
Well, we've covered a number of years here, so.
Yeah. Is there anything, any website you want to mention, or anything else you must say?
Well, I'd like to mention the ones that I've said, because Red Ice. Go to the About section, and they are stating in there, read the entire thing, things that I have in my mind, and it's stated much better by them. I'm finding that the people that have followed this little journey since Jan Irvin and I had our first presentations together, that people are starting to state these things much more succinctly than I can.
Okay.
Red Ice Radio is one of them. You, I think, are going to become another. Of course, Jan Irvin's Trivium Education. I'd also like to mention Tragedy and Hope, who is putting together a group of podcasters, Red Ice being one of them. But another is The Unplugged Mom here in the United States. Others are there as well, and I also mentioned to you the Trivium Binder project, and also the School Sucks project. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I just finished up a 3-part series with Brett Venant of that project. So much of this can be seen at these various sites. I would say go to Tragedy and Hope, and they've got connections to these various other places that are doing much progressive work in the alternative media. I applaud you all for doing what you're doing.
Oh no, thank you for introducing us to all this stuff.
Well, I can't even say that I introduced it, because this has all been done before, and it seems like every so often you have to just bring it into the modern world, whatever the contemporary world. I think the last time this was really done was by the scholastics in the medieval period. And it's just coming forward, and I think that people are starting to use modern language essentially to communicate these ancient ideas. So I can't really. I'm just amazed that I just happen to live through these at what I think are the ideal times as outlined by Dorothy Sayers. And it's really the way your brain develops through life.
Another site that I want to add to that list that you gave is Peace Revolution.
Well, that is Tragedy and Hope, yes.
Oh, is that the same? Oh, okay.
Well, they're actually two different projects, but they're both under the auspices of
the owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting terrible. He's going to shoot me for this. Richard Grove and Lisa Arbachevsky. Yes.
Well, thanks very much, Gene.
Yeah, you're welcome. My
pleasure. I hope the listeners liked it. I'm sure they will like it, actually.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting to more of your presentations that I didn't have time to get to, but yeah, I applaud all that all of you are doing.
Well, thanks very much.
Very well done.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Obama, on one side, has been a rather aggressive president in the area of drones. And, wouldn't you regard that as surprising?
No, it's something we developed on our watch. We had a drone platform.
He uses it.
Well, and so did we. We always, we were the ones that put together the drone with the weapon system. Initially, they were armed. And we used them, I think, to great effect. But I think I have supported his efforts to use drones. I think that's an appropriate weapon. I think it helps significantly. But it's not enough. He seems to have the attitude that, well, we put some drones out there and then get the troops out, bring the boys home, and not be actively involved in that part of the world. We're going to get out of Afghanistan. But where do we launch the drones to keep track of what's going on in Pakistan, or to take out the Taliban leader that we did recently, to launch out of Afghanistan. So those programs are put in place for a reason. They've kept us safe.